Welcome to Coffee with Krav. Welcome back. Hope you have your coffee or your beverage, and we're going to get going right now. Before we start, I just want to go over one thing, and that is for those of you that have been watching Coffee with Krav over the years, you might have seen my dog, Jojo, pop up for a second, or I've mentioned her in the interview. Unfortunately, my loyal friend for almost 15 years has gone to her doggy heaven. And for those of you that either have had a pet now, or you have a pet or a dog that has passed away, you can understand the great pain that I'm feeling today. However, I am forever grateful for the unconditional love that she has brought my family and how positively she has enhanced all of our collective lives. So thank you, Jojo, and rest in peace. Okay, today's coffee. Today, I'm really looking forward to talking to Andrew. We are talking about disruptive technology. Things are changing in our lives at faster speeds than we've ever seen before. So today we will talk about 5G, cryptocurrency, cybersecurity, AI. I'm really excited. So let's go on. Let me talk about Andrew Hull, who comes to us from Yakima. And in case you don't know where Yakima is, it is all the way out in the West Coast in Washington. So we woke Andrew up really early this morning. So we appreciate that, Andrew. Andrew Hull is the Vice President and Exchange Traded Fund Strategist with First Trust. As an ETF strategist, Andrew provides in-depth analysis and commentary related to ETF investing, including tracking industry trends and communicating ETF strategies to financial professionals. Andrew also contributes to the First Trust Investment Insight blog, helps author the quarterly Inside First Trust ETF newsletter. Previous, Andrew was an economic analyst for ETF for First Trust and was responsible for analyzing economic conditions, providing economic commentary and research. I bring to you today, everybody, Andrew Hull. Now, Andrew, let's start. We're talking about disrupting technology. Let's start by defining what that is. So if you can define it and maybe give some examples, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, and thanks, Mark, for having me. It's great to come to you from the West Coast and be able to use this technology to speak to you and your clients from so far away. But yeah, disruptive technology is it's a pretty broad sort of topic, and it's one that gets thrown around a lot, I think, especially in the investment universe. But disruptive technology is really a new innovation, a new technology that has the potential to, I think, displace an existing technology or an industry, or really create a new one. And I think we can all think of numerous examples that we see around the world today. The list goes on and on of what that might be. But I think e-commerce, for one, it could be an example. I'm going to share my screen here just to kind of pull up some examples here. But of course, e-commerce, I think all of us probably shop on Amazon these days and have especially as we go into the holidays, a pile of Amazon boxes probably on our porch as we get closer to Christmas and things. But, another one these days, just an example, is all of the streaming services. So how content is delivered, how we watch that content. I think most of us have, Disney Plus or Netflix. It doesn't seem like that long ago when we were going to Blockbuster stores in person and picking up, cassette tapes or video.
This is interesting. This is interesting because it shows what was disrupted, right? So streaming music, it disrupted the whole record and retail on that. Yeah.
Right. And even think about our phones, our smartphones in our pocket. I have a slide that sometimes I use that has a copy of a Radio Shack ad from, I think, the early 90s, 1994 or something like that. And it shows all of the different consumer electronic devices back then that are all available in one device today that has exponentially more computing power, and that's our smartphones. It's just incredible the amount of innovation. And today, you know, there's a number of different innovations I think we'll get into in a minute, everything from cloud computing to biotechnology and electric vehicles and those types of things. So those are kind of examples. I think those kind of help define really what disruptive technology is for us.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that, and you can see, you know, what they're disrupting. Now, let's take a look at the emerging technologies. Talk a little bit about some of the emerging technologies that's coming up, and just kind of give a broad range of those emerging technologies, and then we'll get into some more details a little bit later.
Sure. Yeah, so I work in our research group at First Trust. And so, of course, we have a number of different investment strategies and within different vehicles that investors can sort of make allocations to and have exposure to a lot of these technologies. But as a member of our research group, I really get to focus on a lot of these new technologies. And there's a number of them that we are really focused on and have been for a long time. You can see on the screen here just a few of the ones that we're really focused on. Everything from artificial intelligence and robotics, which would be, you know, industrial robotics and even autonomous vehicles, those types of things. Blockchain technology, which I think we'll get a chance to talk about in a few minutes here, but basically software technology that allows for digital trust between two parties over the internet. And then there's cloud computing, which we're using right now. Zoom is a cloud-based platform that we're able to communicate with one another, and it's important for storing, you know, information and also companies. I mean, entire public companies are run on the cloud, so that, you know, that's a tremendously important technology these days. A couple of the other ones that we're focused on, of course, biotechnology with the plethora of new medical innovation going on there. And then the last two I'll mention, 5G, which I think we'll talk about in a few moments as well. And then, of course, cybersecurity is kind of the glue that holds it all together. But when we think about thematic investing, disruptive technologies, you know, there's an even broader spectrum of themes that you could talk about. Everything from what's going on in the energy sector and renewable energy sort of stories there to also there's a lot of infrastructure type narrow industries and themes. So when we talk about investment themes, you know, we kind of define that, if you want to broaden it beyond disruptive technology, it's any of those sort of industries that are more narrow than the traditional sort of sector, traditional, you know, the 11 GICS sectors that kind of divide up the economy. So a lot of opportunity, and for investors, there's been no better time to be able to access these types of narrow industries.
Excellent. Thanks for giving that overview. And I'm going to start with cybersecurity. I think that either last month or this month is Cybersecurity Month. So what are some of the developing trends that we're seeing within cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's been an amazing year for cybersecurity, for sure. I mean, just thinking about some of the major hacks that we've seen, everything from the SolarWinds hack to kind of start the year. You know, that was, in my opinion, a very much a watershed hack that occurred. You know, it reached the highest levels of the federal government here and a lot of big tech companies. Of course, then we saw the Colonial Pipeline hack, which you're well aware of, being there on the West Coast in May, or sorry, the East Coast, it's back in May. We also had Microsoft Exchange emails, servers that were hacked. We had meat plants that were shut down. T-Mobile, just I think in September, announced a massive data breach that they had. I just saw the other day Microsoft announced that hackers are, again, trying to attack cloud computing providers right now. That's kind of an ongoing issue. It's really been nonstop this year. It's one of the, you know, when we think back to 2021, there's certainly a lot that's gone on, but cybersecurity is absolutely top of the list as far as, you know, storylines of the year. I would say, you know, it's one of those areas where no one is really immune. Everybody needs cybersecurity to some extent. All of us have, you know, digital devices in our pockets. We have, we use the internet for our banking and transactions and all types of things. One of the other trends that we're seeing is a renewed political focus on cybersecurity too. So the White House issued an executive order earlier this year. If you think back to, I think it was May, President Biden met with Vladimir Putin, and cybersecurity was top of that diplomatic meeting, top of the list of priorities. And so we're even seeing dollars allocated in some of the stimulus packages that we've seen go through Congress. So, I would say those are some trends that we're looking at. I have one slide I wanted to share here. Let me pull this up really quick. But this just goes to show, how the world has changed. So these are fines that have been levied. So when I talk about the political climate behind cybersecurity, there's some direct spending that I mentioned. There's executive orders and things like that. There's also a regulatory push for companies to be in compliance with a lot of the new data privacy laws out there. And you can see here's kind of a list of the fines that have been handed down by breaches over the last several years, Facebook being top of the list, of course. And some of these other fines look relatively small compared to that one, but they're still in the tens of millions of dollars. So this changing public policy environment, I would say, is absolutely supportive of the cybersecurity industry. And I think is interesting and one that I think investors should really pay attention to.
So how has the cyber criminals evolved, let's say, over the last 5 years?
Yeah. So what we're really seeing over the last couple of years has really been the proliferation of ransomware attacks. And this is just kind of some year-over-year data that's just kind of a neat visual. You can see increasing each year as we go forward here. But looking at some of the numbers, I mean, in last year, there were about 200 million ransomware attacks in the US. That was about a 350% increase over 2019. So the pandemic has, I think, really accelerated the attacks that we've seen and the incentive for hackers to continue to hack. Looking at ransomware attacks this year, they're already, I think, above that record level we saw for all of calendar year 2020. So it's really ransomware. And just to kind of tell you what ransomware is, it's basically a software that hackers use to take over computers or a network and gain access to that sensitive information stored there. And then they hold those networks ransom until they're paid, and they're typically demanding to be paid in Bitcoin these days. And so there's kind of a push to potentially regulate Bitcoin because of that. But ransomware is absolutely expanded beyond, I think, most people's expectations. And a lot of the hacks that we've seen, a couple that I mentioned, the Colonial Pipeline, as well as JBS Meats and some of the others, they paid those ransoms. And while they were, restored their operations because of that, we think that that's probably going to be incentive for hackers to continue to try to, gain access and use ransomware for future attacks.
So, they're getting into these big companies, but, a lot of the people that are listening here today are individuals, and, we have to guard against ourselves. What do we do? Like, how do we prevent this, or how do we try or attempt to prevent this?
I think there's best practices that we all should, use. And I'm not an expert on sort of personal cybersecurity protection, but I will say, having, changing passwords regularly, not having, I think one of the big issues is having all of your passwords the same across many different accounts. So hackers can often use your username and password for your banking and your brokerage account and, all across, utilities, you name it. That's a really big concern. And I'm guilty of doing that, using the same account name and password just to keep it simple so I can get to, access what I need to and move on. So I would say that's one of them. I mean, obviously not having all your passwords and things under your keyboard is probably not a great idea either. But I think just being really aware, personally, I get a lot of, phishing sort of emails that come through with suspicious links and things like that. Even text messages now come from, random numbers with a link and stuff. absolutely sort of avoid clicking on those links, because that's really how that malware gets added, put on your system, is clicking a link, it installs on there, and then all of a sudden hackers have access to your system. So I'd really watch out for that as well.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And let's move over to 5G for a second. Can you talk about the evolution of 5G and how we've come to this point?
Sure. Yeah. So 5G is sort of the next iteration of the cellular network. Of course, 30 or 40 years ago, we started out with a 1G network. If you remember, the phones that were a brick in your hand, they couldn't take a picture, of course, they couldn't send a text message. It was just for voice calls. And then over the last decade, we've had a 4G network, which has really brought the internet, streaming services to our pockets. 5G is the next iteration along the timeline, and it's probably going to be the primary network over the next 10 or 15 years. And we're seeing this rapid build out of 5G right now. So it's really, it's about this cell phone upgrade super cycle. It's the next iteration of that. But it's a lot more than that. There's the Internet of Things that it's really, I think, going to enable. But we can get into that in a second. But looking at, we're really on the ground floor of this network. So right now in 2021, I think 5G is available in most major cities here in the U.S., but there's a long way to go as far as the build out of this network around the world. So it's exciting, and I think it's going to bring a lot more capability to consumers.
So is it really only the download speed, or is there other things that 5G can bring to the table?
Yeah, so that's definitely part of the story. So and I think that's where a lot of the use cases, the benefits for consumers come in, is the download speed, something like 20 to even 100 times faster than the 4G network, depending on how close you are to the closest tower and things like that. So that's really the benefit, I think, for consumers. Of course, there's lower latency, which means there's connected devices on the network are able to communicate almost instantaneously. And so that's where we see a lot of the use cases for manufacturing and remote surgeries and all those sorts of things, where it's just instant communication between devices. But I would say that maybe an undertold part of the 5G story is really about the build out of the Internet of Things. And let me share, because I have another slide here. But you can see this is the sort of projections for the Internet of Things. And just to define that, the Internet of Things is really the ecosystem of connected devices around the world. I don't know if you stopped and counted in your home how many devices you have connected now, but it will probably surprise you when you think about not just phones and computers and iPads and things like that, tablets, but also appliances and smart speakers, light switches, your HVAC system potentially. The list goes on and on of those connected, and of course media devices as well. The list is growing, it seems like, by the month at my house, the list of connected devices. And so 5G is really going to, I think, enable this Internet of Things to really grow dramatically. Of course, we can have a lot of devices on our home Wi-Fi network, but out in the world, this is going to support billions of more devices beyond what 4G could ever had the capacity for. So we think about remote sensors and all kinds of connected devices around the world. Really, the possibilities are almost limitless when it comes to just how many devices that this 5G network is going to support, and what that means for everything from infrastructure to business to consumers. So really, really exciting stuff.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the news on the 5G. I appreciate that. Earlier you mentioned about renewable energy, and I'm curious. I've been seeing a lot of news about renewable energy. Is this all hype, or could this be significant to our future?
Yeah, so this is certainly a controversial topic, but it's one that's been very popular with the financial advisors and the investors that we have talked to over the last couple of years. Renewable energy has been, top of the list as far as political priorities, I think, for the new administration. And there's a big push in Washington, D.C. to get, a lot of these initiatives across the finish line and new spending on these green projects and things like that. But I think there is some fundamentals to this. And I have a couple of charts here I wanted to share, because this really goes to show the fundamentals behind this surge in renewable energy and a lot of the returns we've seen for investors in this space. There is a fundamental component behind it. The first one on the left here you can see is over the last 6 or 7 years, the cost of these renewable technologies has fallen pretty dramatically. If you look at solar and wind technologies, the cost of the electricity, and this is the unsubsidized cost, the cost of these energy sources has fallen dramatically, so much so that they're actually cheaper than the electricity produced from coal. And they're in line with what can be produced, the cost that electricity from natural gas is. And that is absolutely a game changer. We've reached, I think, a tipping point with these technologies where now they can stand on their own 2 feet instead of, relying on a lot of subsidies and government sort of tax incentives and things like that to be viable. On the right here, you can see on the screen, I'm looking over here. I have another screen where it shows the charts here, but you can see just how far these technologies have fallen over the last decade. So solar panel technology has fallen about 90%. The cost of manufacturing has fallen about 90% in the last 10 years. On and offshore wind has fallen 30 to 40%. And you can even throw in electric vehicles. The battery technology has fallen dramatically as well. I think it's fallen in the neighborhood of 87% over the last decade. So this is really, we think this is the big story in renewables, regardless of the politics and your views on it. Now that these technologies are able to stand on their own, we think there is a long runway for growth. One other thing I'll just mention about renewables is the public policy environment. I think we all know is extremely supportive. Right now, there's the big meeting in Europe going on between world leaders, and this is top of the agenda right there. I think with cybersecurity, renewable energy is one of the primary goals of a lot of world leaders right now. So again, we think there's a huge runway for growth going forward.
Great. No, thank you for that. And by the way, if anybody has questions, you just have to click on the bottom, the Q&A button, and then type in a question. I have a lot more questions, but if anyone out there has a question for Andrew, please type it in and we'll get that answered. So let's talk about robotics. One of the concerns is that robotics might be taking over people's jobs. Will this be a longer term issue in the United States and around the world?
Yeah, robotics, I think, is a really interesting technology. I mean, it's very broad. There's a lot of different applications for robotics and artificial intelligence in general, but those use cases are growing by the month, by the year as we go forward. When we look at sort of robotics, I think a huge component of the driver, the underlying growth story of robotics and artificial intelligence is the labor market, like you mentioned. Right now we have unemployment that's continuing to decline as we recover from the pandemic, which is great. However, I think we all know that there just simply aren't enough workers out there right now. And this is a problem across the board, across industries. And so we think businesses, whether it's the fast food restaurant on the corner down the street, or whether it's the huge automaker over in Europe, they're going to be looking at robotics as a solution to this labor market shortage problem. We don't see this labor market shortage going away. I think this is a relatively long-term issue. The other thing with labor, not only is it in short supply, but the cost of human labor is also rising pretty dramatically when you think about the benefits and the hourly costs and things like that. On the other hand, automation and robotics, the cost of those technologies is declining. So you have this divergence in the cost structure. And so for manufacturers, for companies that absolutely need higher production and they're not running at capacity, robotics, I think, makes a ton of sense to figure out ways to automate, and those costs we think are going to continue to climb. Just like I showed you with the charts of some of the renewable energy technologies. We think robotics is one of those that's continuing to decline, and the cost of figuring out that technology is going down. So we think there's some interesting drivers there for sure in robotics.
Will robots be taking over the world? Are we going to be like Terminator? We're going to be worried about Arnold Schwarzenegger coming in and
right, or that iRobot, I think, from Will Smith, that old movie. Yeah, it could be. I don't know.
Okay, I've talked to a lot of people about blockchain and Bitcoin, and sometimes people get that all confused between blockchain. So can you just please, for our audience, explain what blockchain is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those technologies, I think, that often gets, excuse me, it has a lot of parallels with Bitcoin for sure. But blockchain technology is really the software technology behind Bitcoin that enables this digital trust between autonomous parties, right? So right now we have a very centralized economy, especially in financial services. If you think about how many different intermediaries there are in a stock transaction, it's 5 or 6, I think, different intermediaries to make that settlement happen. Well, with blockchain technology and Bitcoin, it creates digital trust between a buyer and a seller. So whether that's a real asset like real estate or a stock or a digital asset, whatever it may be, because of the cryptography within blockchain technology, it creates that digital trust that really can't be broken. So how it works, not to get too far into the weeds on blockchain technology, but how it basically works is it's a network of computers that sort of verify a transaction. So they look through the data that's on the block, and there's as a transaction is recorded, a block is added to the chain. It's literally a digital block that is added, data that's added to the blockchain. That can be easily verified by a network of computers. And so this cryptography, how I understand it, the mathematics is almost impossible for it to be hacked or cracked. And so it really becomes a permanent record that can't be removed. And I think what's fascinating about blockchain is the use cases that we're starting to see. Most famously probably would be at Walmart. Walmart and IBM partnered several years ago for their food traceability. So if you think about, the global food supply chain, especially with fresh produce and things like that, what they're able to do with blockchain software is track exactly where this food has been, the temperature it was stored, how long it was on the truck, who handled it, all of the detail, and they're able to pull that up instantaneously if there happens to be a food safety issue or something like that. We're also seeing global shippers use this. Of course, global supply chains are massive and very complex. And so they're using blockchain to get through, complex sort of customs, paperwork and international borders and different ports and all of those logistics, getting through much more efficiently. I think we all would wish that supply chains would work a little faster these days, given some of the shortages we're seeing. But nonetheless, this is, I think, software that has a lot of upside. I think it's still kind of in its infancy, but there's more and more use cases that seem to be cropping up on a daily basis.
Okay, I want to ask a question. Kind of want to end this question about Bitcoin. It's getting a lot of viewing on CNBC, a lot of talk about it all over the newspapers and so on. Bitcoin, a holder of value. Is it a holder of value? Is it an asset class? Is it a method to use for transactions? Is it all of the above? Is Bitcoin going to be around in 5 years, or is Bitcoin going to be bigger than ever? in 5 years. I just wanted to get your take on that, on Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of opinions about Bitcoin. In my opinion, I think it's here to stay, and I think it's something that can't be ignored at this point. I think the total market cap of Bitcoin is over $1 trillion now, so it's a huge asset class at this point. Right now, we're seeing huge demand, and the thing that's interesting about Bitcoin is that it's a limited supply. So there'll be 21 million Bitcoins in total. That's the maximum of Bitcoin that can ever be mined. I think right now we're at 17 million Bitcoins that have been mined at this point. So demand, continues to grow, and I think we saw that with the some of the new exchange traded funds that have launched that investors can have access to Bitcoin futures. Had just tremendous inflows in the first few days of those sort of products. But when you look at adoption, I think it's growing faster even than the internet grew. A couple decades ago. The ecosystem, I think, continues to grow, whether it's Bitcoin mining or the transactions. The number of transactions, the number of companies that will accept Bitcoin as payment or for fractions of Bitcoins and things like that. So I think it's here to stay. I think it's, if you're an investor, I think it's an asset class that you have to certainly approach with caution. There's a lot of unknowns about it. It doesn't trade like other asset classes that we're typically used to. There's, low correlation with stocks and fixed income and things like that. Certainly a lot of volatility and risk there, but I think it's an asset class that it's not going away, and I think there's a lot of demand, and so I don't want to speculate about what the price will do because it could be dropping right now for all I know, but I think it's an asset class worth considering. I think we'll see other cryptocurrencies grow. I think it's a big enough market to support 3 to 5 different cryptocurrencies as we go forward. So I think it's interesting, and then there's a lot of sort of dynamics too with the dollar and the Federal Reserve and just the amount of printing that we're seeing, and new money, the money supply growing, and deficit spending and all that kind of stuff we're seeing out of Washington D.C. Whereas this is a currency that has a limited supply that can't be increased like the dollar can. So interesting for sure.
Do you think the government will create its own cryptocurrency at some point?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about digital currencies, and I know China is certainly talking about having a digital currency over there. It's hard to say. There's certain people that are pushing for that. We'll see. I'm not sure I have a great answer for that, but it's certainly possible for sure.
Well, Andrew, you've said it all. Any other questions that I should have asked? Anything that I missed here? Any parting words that you want to say about the disruptive technology?
Well, I think it's fascinating. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it's an extraordinary time that we're living in to watch all of these new technologies emerge and grow and affect our lives on a daily basis. I mean, thinking about how we lived 10 or 15, 20 years ago is dramatically different than today because of a lot of these new technologies. And that, I think that's going to continue to grow, and our lives are going to continue to change going forward. So I think the other great thing too is investors have a lot of access to these themes that they didn't have in the past, which is great. And there's many different ways to sort of add exposure to these exciting technologies in a portfolio. So exciting times, and I'm fortunate and thankful to be able to kind of research and talk about these with you. So thanks, Mark.
Andrew, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us at having coffee with Krav. You're right. You're very close to Seattle, so you know all about
that's right.
Coffee. So I thank you very much for joining us, and for everybody else. Thank you so much for joining us here with Coffee with Krav. Just want to make another announcement, and that is we're going to be going to every other month with Coffee with Krav. So we're going to be skipping December, and then we're going to go to January. And once we hit January, we're going to be doing Coffee with Krav on Tuesday, 10 o'clock, every other month. So the next Coffee with Krav is January 4th. So I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, happy, healthy New Year. Take care, and we'll see you in 2022. Thank you. Bye-bye.